Do you ever wonder why bad things happen to good people? I know when I was younger, I used to think, I'm a good person, you know, why do these bad things happen to me, you know? But it's, for a start, we are willing participants in every single event in our lives. For those that are into astrology, you know, it's incredible to look at what transits were happening when you had some of your biggest, darkest initiations, and to see, oh wow, this was all part of my you know, my sacred contract, and it's all grist for the mill. It's part of my my crucible, you know, that I'm put in this fire of intensity in order to transmute, turn my base metal or my coal into a diamond or into gold, you know. So, but we need to learn how to work with that. Similarly, when sort of shit gets real, it's a real challenge sometimes to not go into the drama, to stop and to not disassociate, but to detach from the emotional investment and actually go, what is the lesson and what is the gift? What is the blessing in this? Yeah, so that requires that we look at it from a different perspective, from a different angle. Similarly, there is no person walking the earth that has not been betrayed, particularly by people that they really, really invested their trust in. Perhaps that was your parents. Perhaps that was a partner, or even your child, or somebody who you called sister and thought would never betray you. Similarly, we've all had failure. Yeah, it is part of the learning process. So it is inevitable. So how do we survive repetitive betrayals, repetitive failures without becoming hard, without armoring up with this sort of psychic armor that makes us unavailable, emotionally, energetically, unavailable to receiving, to be receptive, to love, to pleasure? And how do we avoid becoming bitter? Okay, somebody who hasn't been able to swallow the hard, you know, they say the bitter pills, but the hard experiences of life. And so, you know, that can manifest as gallstones or just, you know, bile in the body. So, you know, how do we transmute those experiences? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So, you know, how to work with the dark. So the secret is to learn how to navigate the dark. And I've chosen this image of a woman with, you know, a lantern. And this is the role of the sacred feminine. It is to be able to go into the darker realms, into the unknown. And that's not evil. That is simply the void of all possibility. It's about going within to the internal landscape, the place between the worlds, the place where our soul resides. So, you know, that's not something we're taught necessarily. That is something that would be in ancient times part of your mystical training when you started cycling with the moon. But, you know, in a culture that is patriarchal, that fears anything that is remotely feminine, people are afraid of the dark, so they avoid the dark. Yeah, they always want to be out in the sunshine. They complain if it rains, you know, they, you know, always want to be go, 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 do, do, do. And the idea of being still, going within is terrifying. So it's by going within that we become wise and empowered. Here we see this gorgeous butterfly. I'm sorry, I don't know what type it is, but I've chosen it because it's blue, the color of healing. But a butterfly in the chrysalis, it literally dissolves into a fluid. And that is so symbolic of our transition from ego death to soul rebirth. We drown in our own tears of self-pity. My understanding is that's where the symbolism of the baptism rite came from. Yeah, that you are reborn through those sacred waters of your own salty tears, the brine, if you will, of the body. Just like, you know, when we give birth to a child, the first indication of the birthing process getting underway is, you know, the breaking of the waters. We have to dissolve, we have to become open to feeling and allow our emotions to overcome us, to overwhelm us, so that all the rigid old thought patterns are surrendered. And through that, we rebirth a new perspective of ourselves and of life. So in the ancient world, it was wise women, priestess women, that would midwife people's soul rebirth. Yeah, that would help them to navigate those shadowlands within. So as I said before, in our culture, most people are afraid of the dark. This is so symbolic. So they're afraid of their own shadow side, so they don't explore it. And that's, you know, like the saying, where there's fear, there's power. If we really look at what we're most afraid of, whether it's being unacceptable, unlovable, or even examining what our phobias are about, you know, often they're linked to a past life trauma, then we reclaim our power. Whereas if we run away from our fear in the opposite direction, we become more and more compulsive with our behaviors. And we're seeing that in society, people that are running on adrenaline, running on anxiety, and becoming manic. Yeah, whether they're workaholics or just constantly online avoiding their lives, or whether they're compulsively stuffing, you know, alcohol or food in to try and numb themselves, to not feel. So people are doing anything they can to avoid confronting the darkness that they feel within. And the irony is, you've only got to look at someone, you know, if they're wearing a lot of dark colors, you know, it's like a telegraph that they are being called within, that there is deep process work to be done between the worlds, resolving some of the darker experiences of their past, and that when we emerge from that process, we start wearing, you know, white and all these colors. So, you know, this is why teenagers wear a lot of black. You know, they're overwhelmed with the shadow of themselves, of their authority figures that they, you know, start losing respect for. You know, they're going through a major loss of innocence, and they're seeing the shadow on a global scale. So the black is how they're feeling. So we see here girls, you know, chuffing on with their fags. Basically, we will do anything to avoid going deep, like socializing, okay? Being busy. You know, in the West, this is absolutely huge. In the East, because the East is ruled by the feminine energy, there's more acceptance of the dark, of the need to release, you know, the past, of death, and of the need to acknowledge the psychic realm and the need to go within. Those of you who follow me will know that I've just been in Bali, and they've just had their New Year's, which is called Nyepi. And the whole country wears their ceremonial white clothes and goes down to the coastline with drums, with gamelan instruments, with incense, and they energetically clear the parameters of the entire island on the last day of the year, on the understanding that this helps to clear any stagnant energies from any unresolved lessons from the past annual cycle. And that prepares them then to go into the dark, into the stillness. For the first day of the year, the whole country spends it in silent meditation, fasting. So, but this is also a country that has huge ceremonies for death rites. Their cremations are beyond, anything we could imagine in the West. So, for those of us that have incarnated into a Western culture, we've put up our hand to help restore the imbalance of the shadow masculine, oppressing the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. So the feminine is also distorted. And of course, we're all fractals of the whole. We're all connected. We're all part of the one. So the more we seek to go within to heal and integrate the darker experiences that we've had, the darker thoughts and emotions that we have about ourselves, the unresolved wounds, that is how we help shift the planetary energies so that we don't feel so overwhelmed about the state of the world. We are actively contributing without, trying to save the world in an outer way, which is a masculine way. This is a feminine way of doing it. Other people do it by working. I know this is what I have done in order to, what would you say, compensate for fear-based beliefs of not being supported. That was my primary one. So I, and also the world not feeling safe, particularly for girls. So, I would work. And that's a socially sanctioned compulsive behavior. So you can get away with that one a bit more, but it still has a huge tax on the nervous system. And yeah, I see this in a lot of women, particularly priestess women. And by that, I mean women that are called to serve as healers, teachers, space holders, to help midwife this new era that we are in, the Aquarian age. So when we're in a state of hypervigilance, so we're running on our adrenals, we're running on stress because we're being motivated by our unconscious fearful thoughts, it's very difficult for us to wind down the mind, which is in a state of being overwhelmed, to be able to relax enough to come back into our bodies and to sleep. So if we're not getting time to stop, reflect and process, so journaling is a great way to do this. I noticed I was journaling a lot more in Bali, and then when I came back to a Western culture, I haven't been journaling, and so that started affecting my sleep just within a week and a half. So that really flagged it for me, that we must spend that time, ideally equal time, acting and reflecting. Reflecting is one of the feminine traits, whereas acting is a masculine trait. So in the West, we're not encouraged to stop and reflect. It's seen as, that we're faulty, that what's wrong with you, you'd want to stay at home and be on your own. It's seen as something defective, and that's because we're often perceived as machines rather than as organic, psycho-spiritual beings. And if we don't regularly go in and do the work and willingly explore our darker states, through processes such as trance dance, through shamanic breath work, even through, having a healing or a reading, then if we're left on our own, to our own devices, and those darker thoughts and feelings come up, particularly around the darkest lunar phase, we can really spiral and be quite at risk, once we get into those really thick, treacly emotions, such as shame, such as guilt, such as resentment. Yeah, it's like when you're in the bottom of the well, in the, the belly of the whale, the dark night of the soul, then we often do need a midwife to help us to get out of that pit. But if we can identify, oh, I'm starting to get into a spiral of, complaining, of focusing on the negative, then we can help ourselves get out of that pit before, going to the point of no return, sort of thing. So when we experience just our darker emotions, our darker thoughts, we can then shift into judging ourselves. Okay, based on this patriarchal belief that we should be shiny, happy people all the time. And really, just like every color on the spectrum, we will have emotions and thoughts that match each of those colors. That's part of what it is to live the human experience. So to not expect yourself to be gray or to be dark blue or to be mauve or to be black or brown is not realistic. Yeah, sure, it feels great when we feel yellow, when we feel orange, when we feel pink and soft. Yeah, but when we allow an emotion, when we allow a feeling, we then naturally move through it, just like a baby doesn't stay stuck in rage or in, terror or grief. If it is held, it expresses that emotion, and then it moves through to the opposite polarity and expresses pure, unadulterated joy. Yeah. So too with us, if we don't suppress these darker emotions, we don't go into a state of depression, into stasis, in stuckness with our darker thoughts and emotions. We allow the energy to keep moving. So, like I said, we can feel that we've failed if we don't feel bright and outward all the time. And then the mind, when it hijacks and starts being self-critical, we start becoming our own enemy. In my early 20s, I really struggled with depression. I had watched my mum, basically spend the last 5 years I was at home in a migraine mask with the curtains drawn. And she really struggled with depression. So this was sort of anchored for me. This was laid down as the template, with her being my sort of, main feminine role model. And we're both water signs. We're both sensitive. So we feel things very intensely. But because I didn't receive any initiation, like most women, into a mystical perspective of riding the cycles, and for those of you that watched my Red Tent webinar, you'll, that will be familiar for you. But what happens when we start bleeding, when we start cycling with the moon, we start experiencing huge hormonal shifts, as well as we start being more influenced by the rise and fall of the lunar phases, just like the tides of the ocean rise and fall, because we are 65% water, and for women, we are governed by the lunar cycle with our menses. So we have this huge peak and trough every month. And if we don't understand that from a mystical perspective, it's like, you think about being on the outer rim of a wheel, and you're up and you're down, and you're up and you're down. And no wonder women comfort eat, or can fear the intensity of their own emotional, inner world. So I sought out different counselors and, psychologists, psychiatrists, because I, felt so powerless about the intensity of my own emotional highs and lows. And I know my mother had said to me, oh, you're manic depressive. And so I wanted to know for sure. I went to see a psychiatrist, and he said, no, you're not. But to sort of take the edge off my intense lows, he prescribed me Prozac. And I wasn't on it for long. I intuitively just went, I feel numb. And that's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it rather than dealing with what's festering underneath. So, you know, I was grateful to have had that experience, but went, this is not for me. Now, in saying that, I do just want to put it out there that I do actually believe that there is a time and a place for medication for those that have chemical imbalances. I've, you know, been in a relationship with someone that was bipolar, manic depressant, and when he was in psychosis, he really did need epilim, you know. So, you know, it's not that I'm saying, you know, all of the Western medical model is bad, but, you know, the Eastern model is about maintenance, self-care. And it's interesting to know that epilim, the active ingredient, is sodium, is salt, which is the earth element, you know. So psychosis is kundalini that's, you know, awakened in a way that is not integrated, and kundalini is the bioelectricity of the body, and like electricity, if it's not grounded, it's dangerous. But I won't get into that here. I do speak about that in more depth if you're interested in my book, Creating Sacred Union Within. For those who do suffer a lot of anxiety and depression, something else that I became aware of, which I'm going to be tested for, more so for my daughter's sake, and that is something called pyrrole disorder, Pyrole. And this is a hereditary condition that's passed down, and again, it creates a disposition for anxiety and depression. So if, you know, you look at your lineage, either your mother's side or your father's side, and there is a history of mental health, you know, intervention and depression and anxiety, it might be worth looking into it. It's only been known for about 20 years, but what's exciting is that it's treated naturally. So with mineral supplements rather than pharmaceuticals. So, yeah, the testing is quite, if you don't have anxiety before the test, you probably would have. By the end of it, you have to get a urine sample in the dark. So, you know, a bit hard if you've got a skylight in the bathroom. But anyway, so integrative GPs. So GPs that, you know, work with the Eastern philosophies and the holistic complementary medicines, you know, people that can help you to get a test for pyrrole disorder. So, getting back to my journey. As I said, my intuition told me I needed to address the underlying issues, the unresolved hurts and wounds. I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't have, you know, a sort of a spiritual midwife. So like a lot of people, I felt really powerless. I felt lost. I remember I would get into my car after one of these 1-hour sessions and I would sob so uncontrollably. I wouldn't be able to drive for about half an hour because these sessions would actually anchor the victim, because we'd be dredging up the worst parts of my life and I would be reliving the story, in telling the story, reliving the drama, and I would actually just anchor more self-pity and more powerlessness. So I didn't personally find that, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, known as CBT, worked for me, just talking about the problems that I'd had in my life, because it kept it on a mental plane. I wasn't experiencing a deep shift on a soul level. So what I did was I retreated. Yeah, just like an animal goes to ground, you know, will go and hide and lick their wounds. I became more and more of a recluse. I hid from the world because I was immobilized by fear. And that wonderful insight came from a book called Beyond Fear. I'm trying to think of her name. Is it Dorothy Rowe? It was a a wonderful, wonderful book that I read in my early 20s about depression. She's an Australian woman, but had relocated to England. I was so grateful. I wrote her a letter, and bless her, she wrote back. But she talks about depression being a state of absolute fear, when we're fearful of ourselves not making the right choices, because we look back on our life and we go, you know, every choice in my life has resulted in pain. It's resulted in more betrayal, more hurt, more failure. So I'll just do nothing. Yeah, I'll just do as little as possible. And, you know, that is agony, because you're in stasis. It's like being frozen with all of your pain. So I'm just reiterating there on screen. Basically, I was carrying so much unprocessed pain from my past. If you think about, you know, unprocessed emotion, so grief that you didn't get to express at the time because you didn't feel held, you didn't feel safe. There wasn't a midwife there to hold a space for you. There wasn't someone there to say, how are you feeling about that? What's present? What's alive in you? Or perhaps because you were conditioned to think feelings and emotions were a sign of weakness and that you needed to toughen up, and that if you even opened that Pandora's box, that you would be eclipsed by, you know, overwhelm and not come back from that. But if we think about water, which is the element of, you know, that represents emotion, if you're carrying around these unprocessed feelings and emotions, it's like carrying around buckets of water. That's heavy. Yeah, so we don't feel like we've got a lot of energy for life. And there's so much internally calling us to come in and sort out that we don't have the energy to be social, to put ourselves out there in the world, to feel optimistic and courageous about creating a future. It's like, if we can just get through another day. And so when we're operating on that frequency, we attract like attracts like. So we attract situations and people that are draining, that mirror that worldview back to us. And so it just becomes easier, particularly if we're very sensitive, if we're very empathic and we pick up on others' thoughts, feelings, and emotions, to just shut ourselves off even more. So, and the other thing that I'd like to bring in here is that for those of you that have experienced trauma, and let's face it, who hasn't? We've all grown up in a world that was very unconscious. So the group dynamics of our family of origin, the group dynamics of our school environment, whether that was the classroom with teachers abusing their power, or whether that was in the playground with children, you know, scapegoating somebody rather than doing inclusion. We then bring that into our workplaces. So we've all experienced trauma. You may have experienced sexual trauma. You may have experienced birth trauma. You may have experienced the trauma of domestic violence. Yeah. I've experienced all of them. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of you are nodding your heads going, yep, yep. You know, it's why I'm so passionate about healing and empowering women and the feminine. So, you know, when we accumulate these traumas, you know, it becomes overwhelming. And in trauma, we have one of three responses: fight, freeze, or flight. And so what I've come to know through some of the trauma release work that I've done is that the one that seems to be most common for women is freeze. So that's when we, just like a terrified animal goes limp, and it's like they go into the theta state. They cease to be here. They check out as a way of, you know, getting through a situation that is violent or traumatic. So they completely disassociate. Now, the gift in that, there's always an equal gift as there is to any, pain, is that we then, where we disassociate to is to our upper chakras, to the parts of us that hang out of the body, in the more subtle bodies, the outer bodies that are governed by the outer planets. So, we develop and open our outer dimensional portals, our psychic gifts, our clairvoyance, clairaudience, intuition. These are wonderful skills. So this is part of our initiation to perhaps what our mission is this lifetime. But if we don't go back and deal with whatever that trauma was when we were in a frozen, passive, completely receptive state, then we don't even realize subconsciously what we're running away from, what we're compulsively trying to protect ourselves from by, being busy or whatever that is for us. So the other two, fight and flight, most people are familiar with, which is we go into being hyper vigilant or into giving up, basically. So at the end of the day, it's up to us and nobody else. It's our responsibility to heal ourselves. And when we understand that we're going to keep attracting low frequency events that match our level of unresolved trauma, so that's painful relationships, that's painful lessons in friendships, that's work where we don't feel truly valued and appreciated for what we do. Yeah, it's in every facet of our lives. If we don't do the work, we keep reenacting the old karmic patterns and beliefs. And so bit by bit, we become more tired, more stooped. This idea of an elder as somebody who is haggard and stooped. This is a patriarchal projection. That does not have to be the way we step into our elder years. We can do so standing tall with dignity if we've transmuted our past painful experiences into wisdom. And that is what this whole thing is about. So how did I shift this? How did I go from really being caught in that labyrinth of the underworld to making sense of it and stepping into the light? I'm just going to take a swig of my dandy coffee, keep my whistle wet. So I began my spiritual journey at 21. There was a lovely woman who I had a job proofreading police interviews. So I was listening to murderers and rapists when they were brought in for their Q&A. Just to add to my my understanding of the human shadow. So, I was given 2 copies of Kahlil Gibran's book, The Prophet, for my 21st birthday, and a beautiful elder Scorpio woman that had been an alcoholic that had drunk cleaning fluid in her darkest days to get through, handed me a copy of Louise Hay's book, Heal Your Life. And so that was the first beacon that started my journey and awakened me to the fact that it was my responsibility to heal myself and that I could. Rather than, oh, poor me, I had a hard childhood. Because didn't we all, or, a huge majority of us. So, but that still wasn't meeting it. I was, reading self-help books, doing workshops. I was, really throwing myself in. But the real turning point came at 26. And many of you will have heard the story where I got down on my knees and I said to the universe, if you want me to be a woman, send me some fucking role models. Because despite all my, efforts, having, healings and doing workshops and reading self-help books, I was still really toxic. I was smoking a lot of pot, cigarettes, drinking a lot of alcohol, self-medicating with sugar, in unhealthy, unrequited love scenarios. So, every facet of my life was just dysfunctional. And so it's often at that point where the threshold of suffering is so, we reach a point where we go, I can't do any more. Yeah, it's like, fuck you, life. And we throw what I call the cosmic tantrum at God, at the universe, at source. And we're like, that's it, I'm not playing anymore. We upend the Monopoly board. And I can laugh now because I'm well out the other side. But at the time, it is just, either your ego is going to die or you're going to commit suicide. Yeah. And at the moment, for those of you that saw my Goddess Wisdom talk, you will know that the suicide stats are just off the chart. It's absolutely ridiculous. So people are needing this spiritual midwifery. They're needing assistance in making that shift from the suffering of the small self who operates out of the lower 3 chakras, the lower 3 energy centers, to shifting into the heart, and then from there being able to operate out of all the facets of themselves. So it was a call out to the universe, when I said that. And when you put a call out to the universe, believe me, it is answered, even if you can't see it at the time. Sometimes we can be so addicted to drama, so identified by being the victim, the one who's always struggling, that we can't see it even when it's in front of us, when the answer is being offered. But in my instance, I was invited to go stay at a farm. And this was women who had crewed a cabaret show that I'd done with a couple of drag queens over the summer while I was waiting to hear back from ABC TV whether or not they'd pick up my TV pilot, Good Morning Unemployed, which is a whole other story I go into in the Inner Goddess Makeover book. Anyway, so these women invited me up to their farm, and then they said, do you want to come to a goddess workshop? So I went to this weekend workshop, and it was like getting a drink of water when you're in a desert. I didn't even know that was what I was craving. I didn't have the language for it, but it was the answer that I was seeking. And my personal knowing is that if you have walked the priestess path before, if you have served in temples and mystery schools, you will find your way back. There is a huge resurgence of the sacred feminine right now on the planet. Many ancient women that have served in the mysteries are returning to this call out that Gaia, the mother planet, put out to all of existence to come and help midwife her children at this time. And so all of us that are here in a body have responded to that call. So we've all got a part to play. So what I'm going to outline is the wisdom teachings and the practices that help me to make sense of the dark, which are sacred feminine. So first of all, I discovered depression is part of being human. I know when I went to England after having my first nervous breakdown at 18, and I hung out with my grandmother's cousin. He was 72. His name was Jim Forder. Beautiful man. And he said something to me which I'll never forget. He said, you're having a normal response to an abnormal experience. And in those words, he helped to reframe my view of myself as broken, as dysfunctional, as somebody who couldn't be fixed, to somebody who was perfectly normal, and who had gone through some very intense dark experiences and was grappling to come to terms with them. So as I said before, we're every colour on the wheel. In our teens and our 20s, when we're exploring the shadowlands without the experience of age, without experiential wisdom to call upon, that's when we're most at risk of suicide. That's when we're most prone to depression and anxiety. Because as we go around the wheel with every solar transit, with every birthday, we revisit past lessons, past challenges and tests as we go around each astrological sign. The more conscious we become of those, the easier they become, by the way. But when we're unconscious to those, we can at least say, hey, I've been through a breakup before, so it's not going to be as bad as the first one, you know, or I've suddenly had to find somewhere to live. I've been through this before, I will survive this. Whereas when we're going through these experiences for the first time, we haven't yet learnt to develop self-resilience, self-reliance, self-trust. So everything is much scarier. It's like leaping off a cliff. So we need a lot of support for our darker states. That's not to say that women in their mother phase and their elder woman phase don't need support. You know, the descents deepen as we get older. So the descents of autumn and winter through the darker months, particularly if you're living further away from the equator, those descents get more challenging. So we need ongoing support, guidance and midwifery to navigate the dark, because most people don't know how to do that. And it's essential that we learn how to do that, because we can't avoid experiencing the darkness within. Yeah, regardless of how many self-help books or how many circles we've sat in or how many workshops we've done, we will still get taken back to feelings of being unworthy or feelings of being powerless or unlovable or unacceptable. The difference is that when we know the nature of the terrain and we've gathered different tools in our medicine bundle, instead of a depression lasting 9 months, it will last maybe 3 days, because we know how to midwife ourselves through that. And just on that, I noticed that it would always go in threes. So 3 days, 3 months, or a multiple of that, 3, 6, or 9. Even looking back on relationships, they would last 3 months or 9 months or 3 years. So, you know, the power of 3, it's like whether it's past, present, future, the 3 worlds, when we understand there is a mystical lesson in the cyclic lessons that we're learning. So how do we confront our greatest fears when we feel out of control, when we doubt ourselves, when we fear the worst? We're projecting, you know, Murphy's Law onto our life. If you have that in your toilet, please replace it with Desiderata. Much more positive. And when trust is broken, this is a big one, okay? I speak to the subject of trust specifically in the Inner Goddess Makeover book, in the chapter of Artemis, the throat chakra, if that's something you're dealing with right now. And when we endure mistakes or misfortune and we feel despair, because it's inevitable, life will trigger us down downward spirals. So this happens during the darker months, as I said, so over autumn and winter, and that will be more pronounced if we live in a landscape, in a climate where we get the 4 seasons. Okay, so if you're living closer to the equator where you're just having a wet and a dry season, you won't feel the spiral descent so much. But if you are living towards the north-south pole, then you will really benefit from this understanding and these practices that help you to traverse the spiral that the seasonal wheel initiates you through, to get deeper and deeper insights into the darker thoughts and emotions, your darker experiences, so you can transmute them into wisdom and utilize the autumn and winter time every month. This is why in the ancient world, you know, women, that would be when men would go away on the war campaigns, and the women would be left to spin, to work the loom, to weave, and they'd go into trance states as they were doing those repetitive domestic crafts. And, you know, that's a form of meditation when we work with our hands like that in a cyclic way. It allows our mind to just expand and to drift and to daydream, to go between the worlds. And so, you know, that's another great way for those of you that are knitters, or you love to do crochet, or, you know, something that takes you just out of the cognitive self. So why? Oh, I should say just on that, it's not just the seasonal wheel, but especially for women, the 3 days of dark moon, but I'll get into that more. And that's the process that I'm speaking about today, is about working with the process of the dark moon, which is the downward spiral time once a month that mainly affects women. Okay, it's when we're most prone to comfort eating, to depression, to screaming at our kids, to experiencing the darker side of ourselves. So why is that? Because life is cyclic. We look at this beautiful fern frond. I mean, we spiral in, we spiral out. So the deeper we spiral within, the higher, the more expansive our growth, our spiral out can be. But if we only go a little of the way in, if we only dip our big toe into the bath, we're not going to get clean. You know, we're not going to process. There was a lovely analogy in that book I spoke of, Louise Hay's Heal Your Life, where she speaks about, you know, if you've got a festy looking fry pan, if you put that into the water's going to get muddy. It's going to get filthy, okay, for you to end up with a clean pan. So, you know, we need to get messy. We need to risk the chaos and trust that if we follow the spiral path, eventually we will spiral back out. But we've got to follow it all the way to the absolute core, to the deepest, darkest. And so that needs a little bit of encouragement, that we don't stop and sit down and feel overwhelmed and go, I can't go on. So the ebb and flow of the natural cycles, whether it's the seasons, whether it's the moon, whether it's, you know, the daily solar cycle, it takes us up, it takes us down, okay? And the more we align with that and harness the energy, the more we experience grace. The more we don't understand it, the more unconscious we are, the more we push the river and feel that life is something happening to us, being done to us, and then we make up a story about that which is debilitating, which we then project and live. So ancient women's wisdom helps us to navigate the spiral descents of life. So here we see Triskeli. This is a very ancient feminine symbol. Some of you may recognize it from the ancient winter solstice initiation, I don't know what to call it, sacred site called Newgrange in Ireland, where this is etched onto the stone at the front, the entrance to that womb cave. But it's been found in caves made by Aboriginal Australians. I mean, this is a symbol that is sitting in our subconscious, It represents the three worlds, the upper world, the middle world, the underworld, which are governed by the three chronological phases in our life: the maiden, the mother, the crone, or for men, the knight, the king, the sage. So when we understand the 3 spiral paths, when we learn to walk these 3 spiral paths, priestess paths, we then harness and fulfill the fullest growth, the fullest, deepest spiral within, and the greatest, brightest spiral without. So we literally activate our star within. Yeah, if we think about whether it's the earth, whether it's the sun, whether it's the planets, they all have a star within which powers them. Okay, so do we. That's our divine essence. So we strengthen our divine essence when we spiral in and we bring more light of understanding to our darker, shadowy parts, so that we can be more crystalline, we can be clearer, we can be a vessel then as we spiral out and allow more divine light to be emanated through us. So this is how we become stars, if you will, by spiraling together and by spiraling, with the natural cycles consciously. That's how we step into wisdom, understanding, and empowerment. This is inner power, yeah? Which then gets reflected as outer power. So there we have the image from Newgrange, which I was lucky enough to see last year. And, we've lost connection with these teachings and practices that our ancestors, no matter where we're from on the planet, all had access to. It's also why at the oracle at Delphi, etched onto the stone is know thyself, because those 3 spiral pathways of initiation are a framework to know ourselves. And unless we truly know ourselves, we doubt ourselves. So we can't take risks. We can't commit to deep intimacy. We can't fulfill our potential. So that's what I teach. So the other thing I'd like to just touch on before I get into what is covered in the 13 Moons program, which is the journey, the inward spiral journey as a practice every dark moon, is that depression affects women more than men. Okay, so why is that? Well, in addition to these life factors that men also experience, like ending of a relationship, absolutely, yes, you will experience, grief, depression, grieving a lost one, whether that's a pet, whether that's a child leaving home. We're taught that the only form of recognizable grief is when somebody dies. But there's grief if we lose our job, or if a project doesn't get picked up that we've invested everything in. Or it might be that we have a miscarriage. I mean, huge grief. Grief, the loss of potential, if somebody that we, wanted to be in relationship with denies us the possibility. Relocating to a city. I know doing that when I was, how old was I? 19. And I moved 2 states on my own. I didn't know anyone, and I was depressed. I put on 10 kilos just eating cereal every night compulsively because I just was so lonely. Illness and injury. So, these can really debilitate us and cause us to feel powerless, particularly if we define ourselves by what we do rather than who we are. So it is a normal response to an abnormal situation that we feel depression, whether we're male or female, in response to those sorts of, unexpected life happenings. But then there's these additional factors that women are also more likely to experience depression because of. Number one, we are still more likely to be the primary caregivers, which means that we're focusing more on others than on our own process, which leads to burnout and to disassociating from ourselves, so that we've got a backlog of unprocessed crap. Higher levels of sensitivity, okay? women tend to be governed by the upper chakras. So, we're lunar rather than solar. So we can't just push ourselves to work, 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 go, go, go like the masculine. We're not wired that way, which again leads to burnout. And when we have low energy, just like a 4-year-old gets cranky when they're tired or hungry, so do we. We have those hormonal fluctuations that I was speaking about earlier when we start cycling. Men don't have that, okay? That is a huge contributing factor to the highs and lows we experience emotionally and also with our psyche. And women often have an ancestral heritage of depression. If you think about the oppression of women, wherever you are living on the face of the earth, the last 5,000 years, the feminine has been devalued, minimized, overlooked. So that means that our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, our great-great-grandmothers, and we were, within our organic matter anyway, not our soul, but it was sitting in their ovaries. We have taken on that experience in our ancestral coding, in our DNA. So we have more of a predisposition to experience depression. So just breaking that down, caregivers are often more likely to suppress their own feelings in order to spare, whether it's young children in their care or the elderly. We get more women in the care professions such as healing, nursing, teaching. So they can, it becomes almost systemic, that they're always focusing on others and intuiting what others need. So they get further and further disconnected from their own feelings. So they may negate their own feelings if you kind of compartmentalize and put them aside in order to do what needs to be done for others in your care. Again, this can become habitual then, that you don't go back at a designated time and go, right, what was I feeling? I need to deal with this. Caregiving is not culturally honoured or valued in a patriarchal society. So, that alone can erode one's self-esteem, self-worth, so that, we're more prone to experiencing lower emotional and psychological states. And caregivers are often isolated with minimal support. So that's a huge contributing factor. When I speak about women's sensitivity, we're often more empathic, so we take on others' emotional states, and if we're unconscious about that, we'll then try to process everything for them. So we're codependent. So, we mother partners by trying to sort out all their psychological and emotional challenges for them. We're more susceptible to the energy of our environment. So, if we're somewhere that's not surrounded by natural beauty, it can have a real impact on our thoughts and emotions. If we receive no training to manage our sensitivity, so again, that's part of, being initiated into women's mysteries. When we start cycling with the moon, we learn how to manage our sensitivities so that they become a strength, using our intuition, our clairvoyance, clairaudience, instead of perceiving it as a weakness, shutting it down. And so we can take things personally and internalize because we don't want to outwardly attack others, but then we implode, rather than exploding at others, which has a big effect on us. So when I speak of hormones, these induce huge fluctuations in both our mood and our energy levels. Culturally, their impact is mocked. It's like, what's the matter with you? You're on the rag? Yeah, it's like PMT. It's mocked. It's laughed about. It's shamed. It's like, rather than it being understood and worked with. We also experience heightened hormonal transitions between our life stages. So when we go through puberty, when we go through pregnancy, when we're postpartum, when we're going through perimenopause, which can be a 12-year period, and then when we go through moon pause. So, you know, there's all these huge hormonal transitions. I'll be going into that in a lot more detail in the Rites of Passage facilitator training that I'm teaching. So you can find more info about that on my website. And there's no preparation for these increased highs and lows when we become fertile, as I said earlier. With the ancestral heritage, as I said, the feminine's been oppressed for 5,000 years. The impact is in our DNA. So what we heal for the collective, we heal for our ancestral line, both the unborn souls and also going back to previous generations. We're freeing them from repeating those karmic lessons. Often this is the conditioning handed down to us on our maternal line. And it's in the collective thought form that, you know, women have to suffer. So other lesser known factors that contribute to depression for women include the loss of innocence in a predatory culture. So this is happening younger and younger for girls and women because men are not being initiated to understand what it is to embody the sacred masculine, which is a man who understands and honors the feminine in himself and the sacredness of that within himself, so he doesn't violate that in his sisters or on the earth. And I will be doing Grail initiation rites for men starting next year on that. So, you know, in the hope of transforming the cultural landscape around that. Meanwhile, lack of support through our life transitions. So a lot of women feel isolated, unsupported and alone when they go through puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, but also not just those blood mystery rites, but through getting married, through, you know, the empty nest syndrome, through the social changes that initiate us. The lack of mentoring on how the natural cycles affect our energy levels, our moods and our mental states, and the lack of understanding of the feminine part of us in general. So they're all the factors that contribute to us experiencing depression. So know that you're not alone, okay, if you experience depression. Ancient feminine practices teach us the effect that the natural cycles have on our psyche, so we can then take our power back and learn to ride those cycles with awareness. And when we embrace that natural ebb and flow of energy, we create cyclic balance in our life. So then we feel more balanced emotionally, energetically, mentally. And that is the info every woman needs to manage her well-being. She needs that cyclic understanding, those cyclic wisdom teachings and practices. So the number one thing that you can do to balance your emotional and mental well-being is to learn to live in alignment with the lunar cycle, since that's what governs the feminine. And the Sanskrit mandala for the sacral, which is the emotional center, has the upturned crescent moon in it. If we want to balance our emotions, the key ingredient is to learn how to live in alignment with the lunar cycle. Why? Well, as I said, the feminine's governed by the moon. The moon fluctuates. So it builds up to full as it's moving around, so that it's then reflecting more light of the sun. And as it wanes down to dark, so too our moods and our energies get darker. So in the 2 weeks when the moon is waxing to full, our mood, our energy levels go up. We feel more outward, more social, more happy, more open to intimacy, more, I can do this, I can try new things. Then in the 2 weeks when the moon wanes down to new, that's when our mood and our energy levels go down. So you can see here at new moon, when you can't see a moon at all, when it's just black in the sky, you can imagine that's when we're not feeling too happy. So that's the most challenging time, when the moon is at her lowest ebb. This phase is called dark moon. It's the 3 days over exact new moon. So new moon is the opposite to full moon, and the 3 days over it, before, during, and after, is called dark moon. So this is when women are most at risk, mentally and emotionally. And it's also when our kids are most at risk of wearing our shadow. If we don't have a practice that we're going in and looking at our shadow, working with it, embracing our shadow side, growing our wisdom. It's when our partnerships are most at risk of fights and arguments, of saying things that later we really regret. So it all starts with our relationship with ourselves. Can we show up? Can we give ourselves that? Can we be responsible, present for ourselves? So women in the ancient world developed a practice to maintain their well-being during this darkest phase, the darkest time of the month. So instead of avoiding the dark that surfaced in their psyche, disowning it, feeling deep shame when it came out, deep remorse, they embraced their shadow. This is deep, radical self-love. You know, people talk about self-love as, you know, pampering and, you know, yep, that is a self-love, absolutely. But if you really, really want to love the unlovable parts of yourself, then this is the 13 moons journey. This is getting to the core of it. Those self-sabotaging, self-negating behaviors that you do, it's by going and embracing this part of you. So that's how women in the ancient world became whole and balanced. And the practice is called the 13 moons. It's a practice that helps women to heal the darkness within themselves through the light of understanding, the light of self-awareness, bringing the aha moments. That's why I do that. And that thought then ripple out to change their choices. So they don't just unconsciously do whatever they've been doing, but they stop, they pause, and they go, oh, hang on. I've got options. I don't need to do that in the way I've always done it. The 13 moons provides insight during that darkest lunar phase. And it does that by identifying the lesson of the zodiac sign that the dark moon is in that month. So what happens as we journey around a whole year, okay, the moon once a month will take its turn being in each one of the zodiac signs. Now, why is there 13 moons instead of 12? Well, it will always end up in one sign twice, okay, because there's 13 lunar months. So it goes through that cycle from new moon to full moon and back to new moon 13 times in a solar calendar year. That's why the number 13 was sacred to the goddess and why it was then demonized by the patriarchal empiric cultures that stamped out the sacred feminine for fear of its power undermining their agenda to dominate using fear. Because people that are empowered can't be dominated. So we start in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac wheel, and we journey around looking at the shadow of each one of these signs within ourselves. So the insights, when we get insight into seeing the shadow of that sign in us, which is being evoked by the moon, which governs our inner self, our psyche, our emotions, being in that sign that month, it's going to bring up the shadow traits. So the weaknesses of that sign, we're going to see them played out in our friends, in our family, in our work colleagues, as well as in ourselves. Having insight into that, we then light up all the neural pathways that make the connections, the synapses in that labyrinth mind within, and we get it. We go, oh, I see the connection. Yeah, that's all shadow Aries behavior. Yeah, so it immediately just fast tracks our wisdom because we have insight. We get to see the patterns. You know, the sacred feminine is very much about patterns. So once we identify the patterns, then, you know, we accelerate our understanding, our wisdom. And that's how we find our way out of the dark, out of the spiral labyrinth of the mind. When people are in a state of depression, they're in a dark state of mind. People talk about the black dog being depression. It's interesting. Hecate, or Hel, the Norse goddess version of Hecate, the wise woman who governs the underworld, she's always got Cerberus, you know, the three-headed dog who's a black dog with her. So, you know, when we're stuck in the mind, the jail, the soul cage, when we can't see beyond the conditioning, the limiting beliefs, when we're caught by that, we can't seem to find our way out of the mind. You know, it was said that the Minotaur was in the center of the labyrinth. The Minotaur is the bull, half man, half beast. This is all of us, that we feel that we're too beastly to be loved, you know, that we're unacceptable. So, and, you know, that's the lesson of Taurus, self-love. That's what helps us to get out of the labyrinth. So once we get the keys, and Hecate, the wise woman, the crone goddess, she is the one who, keys are one of her symbols. She opens the door to a new way of perceiving so that we can get out of that labyrinth and emerge back into the light, the opposite archetype of Athena, the golden girl, victorious as a heroine, to then take what we've learnt from our own trials and tribulations to help make the world a better place. And then we light the way for others. So having that understanding helps us to then make better choices so that we caretake our needs better on a regular basis, so that we can, you know, weather our descents. If something bad happens, it doesn't break us. Yeah, because, you know, we understand how to honor our needs in a cyclic way. You know, as I'm filming this, we've just come out of the equinox, which is a time of, you know, restoring the balance. And we do that through cleansing, through, you know, cleansing our homes energetically, through cleansing our body temple, through fasting. You know, when we understand the lesson of these cycles, then we can ride the cycle with grace, like a bicycle. Yeah, we have balance. You need balance to ride a bicycle. If we're unbalanced, you're not going to be riding that wheel too well. You'll be out dizzy, like that old fairground attraction, the Gravitron, where you get spun to the point of vomiting. Not that I ever did that, thankfully. So I'd like to share with you the 13 Moons online program that I created to support women wherever they are in the world, so that they can do this from the comfort of their own homes. Because let's face it, dark moon is when you don't really want to get out of your pajamas, only if you have to, through that hardest time of the month. And like I said, you can do it in the comfort of your own home. I do just want to add, this is the time when women are most likely to menstruate. So that's another reason to go deep, to utilize that time when we're psychically open and expanded. It can be a menstrual practice, yeah. If you're no longer bleeding, do not feel in any way that, you know, you've been denied, because our cycle continues energetically. And you've distilled that power within you, so you can go deep, even more so at the dark phase of the moon. So you simply access the course materials from the forum, the platform where it's hosted, and you can access any time. You don't have to download heaps of stuff which take up space on your computer. You're very welcome to download the materials if you want to, but you don't have to. You simply log on when it suits you. So This way you can fit it in around your other commitments such as work and family. So each month what you receive is a video tutorial which explains the way you're likely to be triggered during that 3-day dark moon period. Now, often you'll notice it coming up in the final week of the lunar month, okay? But particularly over those three days of the dark moon, I have prepared these video tutorials to take you into that sign, so you really get to understand the terrain. You get to understand the strengths that can help to counteract the shadow traits of that sign, as well as the lessons, as well as empowering activities that you can do over that dark moon to really harness the strengths of that sign. Now, a lot of people, thanks to the sort of, what would you say, minimizing of astrology, think that your star sign, which is your sun sign, is all that you are. I'm just having a drink. This couldn't be farther from the truth. Your sun sign is simply the soul gifts that you've incarnated with. But, your natal chart, your birth chart, which is where all the planets, all the asteroids were at the exact time you took your first breath. It's like a snapshot of your lessons, this earth walk, of what you've agreed to journey. All the aspects and degrees between those all tell a story. But more than that, we are being initiated by the spiraling of the cosmos through the lessons of every sign, as we journey the moon in every sign, as we journey the sun in every sign, as we journey the seasons through the signs. So we have an opportunity to become whole, to see not just and identify with our sun sign, but to see that we in actual fact embody all the signs, all the shadow traits, all the strengths of the whole zodiac wheel. When we do that, we become a Renaissance person. We become Zen. We become whole. We develop that I am presence because we see ourselves reflected in others. So we develop more compassion for others. It's a great tool for conscious relating, so that you really see, oh my goodness, these are the lessons that we're journeying with our children, or in partnership. In the workplace, you'll see this. It'll just help you to have more harmonious interactions. So these insights help to identify the specific timely lessons that you will be presented with at each dark moon. The saying, better the devil you know, better to know what the dark side is that's going to be evoked at that time of the month, rather than not having a map. So then you can pierce the darkness with clarity, with awareness, and that creates empowerment. If you have a map, then it's much easier to deal with the problems. That's how we grow wisdom and empowerment. I've used the image of an owl because an owl has sight that can penetrate and see in the dark. So as well as those monthly tutorials, you get practical strategies and processes to help you embody the strengths as we journey around the zodiac over those 13 months. So that comes as, it's like a step-by-step journey, if you will, to build upon your confidence, your understanding month by month. And I've used this image from the film Moana, which I just love, where she's looking into the face of the shadow feminine, illustrated by the volcanic goddess, sort of Pele, who, this is a woman when she's receives so many betrayals and hurts that she's got no receptivity left. She's just on the warpath. She's fire as an element. She's destruction. She doesn't even realize how she's destroying possibilities for growth and healing. And this is all of us, okay, to some degree, until that part of us goes, I'm willing to go in and find out why you're hurt, why you're angry, why you're resentful. So to help with that, you'll be posted out my oracle deck. It's a light and shadow oracle deck to consult every month. So it's a simple deck. Half of it is strengths, so light attributes that we all have, and the other half of the deck are shadow traits. So the sorts of qualities that perhaps we don't want people to see in us, that we don't even want to see in ourselves. So each month, as part of this, process, you pull a card from each side of the deck. Okay, so you're shuffling the deck, you've got your eyes closed, your subconscious, your soul is pulling the card, and you're asking, what do I need to own in myself? Both my strengths that I haven't seen and my shadow trait. Okay, and then you journal about that. So it's another tool for getting more insight into what you don't know about yourself. And that helps you to identify your disowned traits, because, in that Pandora's box, we don't just have, the wounds, but we have our genius. But we don't access our full light and our genius until we go in and have a look at what's sitting in there. And what I mean by that is, growing up, if our particular gifts weren't understood by our parents and therefore weren't validated, we stop sharing them. So, for instance, you'll see a lot of kids that are psychically open, that see spirit, but if every time they share that with their parent kind of, is a bit patronizing and mocks them, or, tells them they probably need to stop playing with their imaginary friend now because they're embarrassed by them talking about, thinking it's fantasy, then they learn that's not welcome here, and they put it in their Pandora's box. So when we go and open Pandora's box, and what I mean by that is, the hidden stuff that's sitting in the underworld in our psyche, we then can pull out what is of great use to us and in our mission. So we can then journal and have a conversation with our higher mind to get even more insight. So each month you'll get a questionnaire with self-review questions that pertain to being able to identify the issues of that sign and how you are playing them out in your life, to just, again, accelerate your awareness. And every month you get a guided meditation. I recommend doing these in the bath, because when we're in that feminine element of water, it's like being in the womb, because we're in the cosmic womb during dark moon. We're in the underworld, which is simply the womb within the earth. We've been taught to view the underworld as hell, as this horrible place, the dark, somewhere you'd never want to go, when in fact it's like sitting in an egg or sitting in a big womb. So the more we make a lovely comfy womb space for ourselves, whether that's sitting in a little makeshift mosquito net teepee in bed with doonas and, herbal teas and lots of comfy cushions, or whether we do our meditation in a nice warm bath with essential oils and candles. It's about making that inviting, saying, yes, come on in. It's time to, get to know yourself a bit deeper. So in these guided meditations each month, I take you through an inner labyrinth journey to meet the shadow aspect that's been denied at each one of those 12 zodiac gates, so that you can then reframe that and re-emerge integrated and more healed and whole, and therefore wholly honouring your sacred feminine. So this process, this cyclic process, helps you to resolve and reframe your past in a way that is empowering, so you don't feel like you are forever the victim, but that you are taking your power back and doing your own work in your subconscious to restore what was wounded. This is how we integrate those disowned aspects. It's an act of self-love, loving the shadow. So you have lifetime access to all the course materials, so you can do this practice more than once. You might want to do it every year. You might just want to do it 1 year, and then when you're feeling this stuff coming up, dip in and go, right, what was the dark moon lesson for this month? Because I seem to be having a hard time, you know. Or you might want to keep it for your daughters when they start cycling with the moon. And there's also a private online forum, so you don't have to take this journey alone. So women of all ages, all cultural backgrounds, all walks of life are on this forum sharing their journey of this experiential path, which I encourage you to really participate in that forum. You don't have to, it's completely optional. And it is private, it's not on Facebook, it's a separate platform. Because, you know, to share the journey, you'll get a lot more out of it. You'll suck the nectar from the experience, suck the marrow from the bones. And it's more enjoyable, you know. The way of the feminine is to share. That's how we process. So you get a lot more aha moments when you're all sharing the insights that you got, and you'll see mirrors and reflections in that, which is very powerful. And because it's a feminine way of learning, there is no measurement, no results-based learning. So there's no assignments, no assessments, no deadlines, no time-specific webinars, because there's people logging on from different time zones, and there's no pressure, no stress. It's about the joy of learning and the love of learning, rather than you needing to prove what you know to an external authority figure. So the benefits that you gain are increased self-awareness and empowerment, greater self-acceptance and compassion, identification of self-sabotaging patterns, because if you don't even see how you're undermining yourself, you can't self-correct. And just on that, the more we take just, you know, I would say all up, the processes would take a couple of hours. So a couple of hours every 28 days will minimize the chance of you making costly mistakes in your outer life. It will increase your self-care and increase your well-being mentally, energetically, emotionally, and therefore physically, because our physical illness is the manifestation of what we've ignored energetically, mentally, and emotionally, then manifesting. This practice helps to reduce stress and to balance our emotional well-being by aligning us with the lunar cycle. So then we're less likely to comfort eat or, you know, need to bolster ourselves with alcohol or cigarettes to weather the storm. And it accelerates our wisdom and our intuition. And you get my guidance for the dark times for 13 months for a full feminine cycle. So this practice, it will reduce the inner critic. So that's the part of us that expects us to be perfect at all times in all of our roles, whether it's as best friend, as daughter, as boss, as employee, as student, whatever. This way, the inner critic is not running you, okay? It's a way of anchoring the soul every dark moon, who is benevolent and compassionate. That means less comfort eating, as I said, less self-soothing with wine, if that's your chosen toxin, and bringing the light of understanding so that you are set free from feeling captive to those darker states. So this is what other women have said about their journey through the 13 Moons course. Yulia says, thank you, dear Tanishka, for this amazing dark moon journey. It's been very big for me, with many revelations, deep work, and wonderful treasures along the way. And Cindy says, what an amazing 12-month process it has been. Thank you so much, Tanishka. I'm continuing to learn and to seed to others from your beautiful work. So my online courses, you may have done some of my online courses yourself. People in 44 countries now worldwide have loved these online training courses. And the value that's included in this one, there's 13 modules. So each module is valued at $49 each. I've used US as the global currency. The Oracle deck is worth $25 US. And the lifetime access to the forum is $199 US. So the total value, if you were to add that up, is $1,093. Okay, but the course, in order to keep it accessible, is only $230. Okay, so that's just a fraction of what it actually costs, with all the digital software and plugins and email database and graphic design and all the hidden costs that you don't see, as well as the time and the energy that it takes to create this and promote it and so on. It's only $230. So you can pay that over 13 months. So it's only $19.99 a month, okay? Or we'll give you $30 discount if you just make it one upfront payment, okay? So it's $200 upfront or $19.99 a month. If you're working in the holistic industry, you would be able to claim this as ongoing professional development. So just, submit your receipt to your bookkeeper, or if you do your own tax. And I'm offering a special discount for those that are here live watching this webinar. You'll receive my 7-day Cosmic Goddess program free if you sign up in the next 24 hours after watching this webinar, and that's valued at another $29.99 US. So what this does is it helps you to understand how each day of the week is governed by a different planetary energy, a different planetary sphere. So that again brings up lessons and also an awareness of the best time to schedule activities. There's a meditation for each one. Activities, ceremonial tips for each one. So yeah, it's a lovely little bite-sized course that helps you align with those planets that govern the 7 days of the week. So what you receive in that are 7 daily practical tips to optimize your day, 7 daily video meditations, and 7 daily journal activities. So it's a 1-week course. It's up to you. When you start the course, you'll receive it all via email as a daily email, and all the links are in there. So you might want to, if you don't have time to do it, in this coming week, just save them to a folder in your email inbox, and then you can do it when you've got the time. It's probably about, I would say, 45 minutes a day. In terms of a time commitment. And there's so interesting facts about each planet, including its symbol and its effect on us. So in just a moment, Jen is going to put the promo code into the chat option for those of you that are here live, so that when you go to my website, themoonwoman.com, if you click on short courses and you go to Cosmic Goddess, when you go to the checkout, you just enter this promo code and you'll get it for free. So just recapping the 13 Moons course, it's valued at $117.99 US, but it's only $230 for you. If you pay by the month, so that's 13 monthly installments of $19.99, or $30 you can save up front and just pay $200. So that's everything. Thank you for joining me live. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen now so that we can have our Q&A. So if you've got any questions that you've written down or that you've thought of while I was talking at you all, this is the time. I'm just going to take a big swig of my drink. Oh, my throat. Talk. So if you feel a bit shy, you don't have to speak on microphone. You can click that chat option by putting your cursor down to the bottom of the screen. Thanks, Jen. And you'll see a thought bubble. Click on that. It looks like we've got 3 things written there already. I'll go and have a look. If you would like to ask me a question, go to the bottom left of your screen with the cursor and click the microphone, and that will unmute your mic so you can ask me a question directly. And don't worry, there's no stupid question. In fact, you can guarantee someone else is probably sitting there thinking, oh, I'd like to ask her that, but oh, do I dare? So feel free, ask away. We just ask that when you're not asking a question that you click that mic again to put the red stroke so that it's muted so we don't get lots of background noise, which is distracting. So it looks like there's something in chat. Okay. Carla said, thank you. Thanks, Carla. Jen has said, so Jen has put the promo code in there as well as the link to the event page. If you feel called to sign up for the next intake, which is, what's the date of the next intake, Jen? I've gone blank. I know it's the April. It is the April new moon. It's the new moon in Aries.
It's on the 16th.
Blessings. Thank you. So Janet has asked, when this Zoom meeting closes, will we be able to click on the courses? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jenna suggested you might want to just copy and paste the link and put that into the URL, web browser. Cynthia's saying, hi, I'm not seeing the promo code or the links. That's curious because I can see them. Jen, do you want to just put them in again? Thanks, love. Let us know, Janet, if you can, Cynthia, if you can see that. It's just been put in again. You got it now. Brilliant. Excellent. Well done on speaking up. Okay, so has anyone got any questions about anything that I spoke about or the course? I know I might have just overwhelmed you with info. It's okay. You might need to go for a walk or go and sit quietly and have a cup of tea and just, let that all ruminate a bit, maybe journal it. That is actually the feminine way of processing. We need yin time after absorbing a lot of information. Yeah, when I structure my retreats and workshops, we'll do some teachings and then we'll do a process to integrate. Janet says, Tanishka, you're truly a blessing. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for appreciating me. Nicole says, what is the best way other than Facebook to see what is specifically going on with the moon each day, not just the day of the week related to the planets? Okay, well, look, Facebook is quite fickle, so you won't actually see my posts every day anyway if you're only following me on Facebook. So the best way is to subscribe free on my website. If you go to the home page, you'll see my daily Lunar blog. If you click on that, that'll take you to the page to subscribe. So it doesn't cost anything, and every day you'll get an email update telling you what the daily moon phase and the moon sign is and how to deal with the lessons of that. Elizabeth, what would you say about menstruation that occurs outside of new moon, dark moon phase, e.g. full moon? Thanks for a great webinar too. Your alignment with lunar energy is wonderful to experience. Oh, thank you. Okay, so this is a question I've been asked many times, so I created a video for this question. and put it as a bonus in my Red Tent online course. So I won't speak in length about it, but suffice to say, when our menstrual cycle moves closer to full moon, it's because we're not open to intimacy, to others, especially to procreation, because we're needing to do inner work. Because full moon is the time of union, the time of communion. It's when the moon reflects the most amount of sunlight. So if we are putting out the ovulation pheromones at full moon, because that's 2 weeks after our menstruation, and if we're menstruating at dark moon, we're going to be putting out, you know, even our gait changes. They've done studies, and women walk differently when they're ovulating. So without even smelling their pheromones, men are like, who's that babe down the street? So if we've got, you know, the roller door down and we're needing to do some inner work, we don't want to be dealing with other people's stuff. So the wisdom of our bodies reflects that, and our menstrual cycle will change. But I go into that in a lot more detail in the Red Tent course. So if menstrual mysteries is something you really want to learn about, then the Red Tent course would probably be the best starting point. And thank you, actually. That's reminded me to say, I'll get to the other questions in just a sec. I have a lot of resources on my website. You know, some are little short courses, and others are priestess paths. So, you know, committing to a journey over 7 months or 13 months, and others are facilitator training. So don't take on more than one at once, okay? You will rob yourself of the fullest experience of that course, yeah? Give yourself the one that most lights you up right now. So it might be 13 moons, it might be another course, okay? But, you know, just be one directional, yeah? Only do one at a time, so that you're really, giving it every chance, because it will play out in your life, okay? It's not just factual learning, okay? These are shamanic pathways. So the bits of information, you'll then see them playing out through serendipity, synchronicity, symbolism, you know? So give yourself the space to really inhabit the course and allow the course to change you on all levels. Does that make sense? I'm sure it does. I see some nodding. Thanks, Carla. Okay, so I'll go back to the questions here. Nicole says, thank you. You're welcome. Catherine says, would you please briefly recap what's included in the 13 moons? Okay, so there's first of all, there's a tutorial which explains the lunar cycle and its effect on us specifically. Then there's the monthly tutorial you get, which is, you know, a PowerPoint taking you through every sign in detail. So you get to know what's likely to play out for you, how you'll be tested. Then you get the Light and Shadow Oracle deck, so you can use that as a journaling tool. You also get the self-inquiry questionnaire, again as a journaling tool. And finally, the guided meditation to go into the labyrinth, to work on a subconscious level to reclaim that aspect, that soul fragment of you that is wounded, that reflects that part of that spoke of the wheel on the Zodiac journey. So I hope that answers the question. And the forum, of course. So you've got support along the way. And there is a certificate you get at the end. I forgot to say that. So, yeah. Cynthia says, thanks so much for this wonderful experience. Oh, thanks for joining me. T, thank you so much for being you and sharing your lessons. I look forward to absorbing more of your teachings. Thank you, T. Appreciated. There we go. Jen's put up a link so you can subscribe if you click on that to, thanks so much, Jen, to the free Lunar guidance. You might want to share that with anybody you know too, maybe as a birthday present or something. It's free. Bahare, when I tried to register, oh, that's weird. I got $2,600 for 1 month for total. That sounds like some sort of brain fart technologically. Mercury is retrograde. So I'm sure Jen, bless you, will be straight in there checking that out. Bahare, would you mind dropping Jen an email? Oh, you've said already. Jen's already on it. Hi, Bahare. I've just tested. Can't see why that's happening. Could you email me at admin@themoonwoman.com and I will personally assist you with this. Great. So look, absolutely, if you have any problems whatsoever, whether it's you think of a question after this when you're going for a walk and you're integrating, or if it's more of a tech question with the website in trying to register for the course, know that we're only an email away. Okay, so just admin@themoonwoman.com, and Jen, who's here, she's the sort of the admin officer, the course enrollments officer, so she knows all the ins and outs and will also help you with logging on. If you've never done an online course and the idea of it is like, I burst into tears when my ex-husband tried to teach me how to send an email. So believe me, if I can get my head around this technology, you can too. Great-grandmother Spider has given us the World Wide Web to weave together and reweave a whole new cultural landscape. So, don't hide out in fear. We're here to help you. And the other thing is you don't have to do it all online. You can download, print out materials, or, watch them, or listen to the meditations in the bath. And the actual tutorials, I think they go for about half an hour. So that could be something that you watch while you're waiting for the kids to finish soccer practice or ballet, or you know what I mean. If you're thinking, oh, I don't have the time, think of how you could work that in as a support. Okay, Bahare says yeah, thank you. Lynn says yes. Elizabeth says thank you, that makes sense. Great. T is saying, so if I'm doing the Inner Goddess retreat in September, should I hold off doing the 13 moon course? That would be fine. I would say if you were doing the 7-month Inner Goddess course, hold off doing it. But if you're coming to the retreat, and I look forward to meeting you in person, that's a 7-day intensive process. So fine to, do that as well as do a 13-month priestess path. Good question. Catherine says, thanks. Bahare says, it was fixed. It was my fault. I added that for 13 times. Wow. Well, I'm glad that, yes, you don't need to be paying 13 times the price. Good. I'm glad. Good old Mercury retrograde. Sally says, thanks for this. I'm getting $200 for 1 month. Oh, plus $20 GST. Okay. Thank you. Good point to raise. If you are based in Australia, by law, I have to charge GST, which is 10% at the checkout on everything on my site. So I that was an omission of mine. I didn't think to put that in the the webinar. So I am sorry for those of you in Australia. That money goes straight to the government, not to me. But there's a 10% GST tax on that, goods and services tax. Jen, would you just weigh in on what's happening there with it coming up saying that it's for 1 month? I think that's just a sort of WooCommerce thing we can't get around, which is do you want to answer that? Because that's more your domain, darling.
I was just typing it out, but yeah, because we offer payment plans. So the 13-month plan would be $19.99 for 13 months. And it's just a systems way of treating it. So it's just that one payment that will sort of be a non-reoccurring payment, if that makes sort of sense. So yes, you'd have access to the full course, but you'd only get charged that one payment, just to clarify that.
Thank you. So if it says 1 month and you're paying upfront, trust that you will not be charged a second time.
That's right.
Be good if we could fix that, because it is very misleading. Good to question that. Thank you. Because, I don't want anyone else going, okay. Dotia, thank you, Tanishka. I read your Moon Woman Daily. Thank you, and find it immensely helpful. I'm so glad. You're a blessing, and I'm truly grateful for your work, and thank you, and that you make it all accessible. Well, I also have to thank Jen for that, because she, does a lot of work in doing the actual posting and finding great images and formatting it for me. So, it's a collaborative process, which is the way of the feminine. So, but thank you for appreciating our daily efforts. Okay, Sally says, okay, thanks. Terry says, good to know. So I've got no more questions. Dodie is saying, thank you, Jen. Carla says, I look forward to your daily moon wisdoms in my inbox. Great. Thank you for them. Thank you for a wonderful meeting. Blessings to you. Lynn says, I look forward to this. I've taken your Red Tent Facilitator course as well. I recognized your name, Lynn. Fabulous. Look, they really complement each other, and it will give you more inspiration then to bring into your circles as a Red Tent Facilitator as well. That's a really good point, because, when you're going deep and you're journeying, it's like every woman that comes to your circle is a reflection of you. So, beautiful, compatible, absolutely wonderful. Jolie says, love to you, my dear. Hi, Jolie, and love to you all. Fabulous. Has anyone got any more questions, either to ask via microphone or chat? No? Okay. All right. Well, look, lovely. Thanks. It was really great having you all here. I mean, it's always so powerful when women focus their energies and gather from all over the world. And I trust that you have walked this path before, and that if you are called to it, don't go into your head about, should I, shouldn't I? Just trust. If you get a sense of, I'm meant to do this, now is the time, then absolutely commit, okay? Because I know the benevolent universe will conspire to support you wholeheartedly in that, whether it's about the money, the time, whatever. But if you don't get a strong calling, don't do it. Okay, you might want to look at other resources, whether it's mine or somebody else's. But, when we go into our heads about whether or not to do something, we actually just get more and more confused. So really, if you're not sure whether to do it, just unplug from everything and everyone, including me. Find a bit of quiet time, put your hand on your heart, and just get a sense of, does this excite me? Does it resonate in my bones, in my womb? Does this feel like a yes to me? Yeah. Does it feel expansive? Or do I get a constriction? Do I get a diminishment, a draining, a resistance, a no? Yeah. Your body consciousness knows, okay? Because our subconscious, it sits in the body, yeah? So we're going deep into the body, deep into the underworld, deep into the womb within you, the womb in the earth. So ask your body and trust the response. Terry says, thank you, Tanishka. Okay, well, I'll bid you all farewell. Thank you so much, Jen. And I look forward to having those of you walk this pathway that feel called to. It's an honor to be initiating you. So, blessings on your day. And, journey well. Ciao for now.